My name is Sarah, a dedicated mother of two wonderful kids. Michael, my husband, is a hardworking man who spends most of his days at his job. We have a lovely 3-year-old daughter named Lily, and our youngest, Mia, is just a year old. Life is generally good for our ordinary family, but there's one thing that constantly nags at me. My mother-in-law, Linda. It feels like Linda comes over at the most inconvenient times, especially during dinner preparation. Without much warning, she walks into our home, just as she often does. It's not a fixed schedule, but she shows up around this time frequently enough that Lily hardly even looks away from her favorite cartoon. "Sarah, is this fried food again?" Linda's disapproval is evident. "That's not good. It's so oily. You need to take better care of Michael's stomach when he comes home tired from work. It's not good for the grandkids either." "But Lily really likes it," I reply hesitantly. "Well, that's because you only feed her junk. Look, I've made a creamy vegetable stew and minestrone for you. It's essential for the kids to get used to Western food from an early age." Linda starts setting the table with the large containers of creamy stew and minestrone she brought. It's a lot, enough to last for at least 3 days, and I feel a little down just looking at the stew, which is mostly just carrots and cabbage. "Come on, stop daydreaming. I'll take the food you made home with me, so go ahead and pack it up. It's not tasty, but we can't waste food." This is routine. Last time she visited unexpectedly, she replaced my clam chowder with her own fried chicken. Holding the still-warm container, she left without even looking at her grandchildren. Once the front door closed, Lily turned to me softly. "Grandma took my fried chicken again." My heart aches seeing my daughter's sad face. "Don't worry, there's a little bit of meat left. Just wait a moment." Yay! As I heat up the oil again, I feel relieved seeing Lily's joyful reaction to my words. However, my inner dissatisfaction remains. Linda has been overly intrusive since my marriage, but it's gotten worse over the last year. Every week, she shows up unannounced during dinner prep time. Initially, she would just criticize my cooking and parenting, then leave her creams due on the counter. But for the past 6 months, she started taking my food home with her, effectively ruining our meal. I can't imagine Linda, who lives alone since my father-in-law passed away, eating all 3 servings. She's probably throwing it away. As I prepare baby food and distract the kids, I manage to cook. It's tough, but seeing my family's happy faces keeps me going. Yet my fried chicken, braised pork, mapo tofu, and hamburgers, all of it gets taken away. I grew up in a family that ran a restaurant, and my dad taught me how to cook. So I'm confident in my culinary skills. And yes, I think my food tastes better than Linda's overly sweet creams do. It irks me to have my skills negated by her. But with Lily and Mia in the picture, I've been struggling to stand up to Linda, their grandma. More cream stew? Michael, who comes home after the kids have gone to sleep, makes a face when he sees dinner. Since only Lily's share of fried chicken was left, I served Michael a large platter of the cream stew. What can I do? It's what Linda brings over. If you don't like it, you tell her. "Yeah, I guess." Michael pokes at the stew, as non-committal as ever. She shows up without considering Mia's nap time, and even takes away Lily's favorite foods right in front of her. Well, she's lonely since Dad died. That was 2 years ago. How much longer do I have to put up with this? "Yeah, I guess." Michael is usually reliable, but he avoids confrontation when Linda is involved. Another pointless conversation goes by, and I let out a deep sigh. The only silver lining is that she hasn't suggested moving in. One day, tired of the same old routine, Linda says something different when she drops by during dinner as usual. "Sarah, this Christmas, everyone's gathering at our place." "What?" I exclaim in surprise. After Michael's father passed away last year, we couldn't really do anything, right? We've been relying on relatives from his side since the funeral, so I'm inviting them to our home as a way of saying thank you. I try to hide my reluctance, but it's challenging. Linda has always been in the habit of hosting family gatherings at her brother-in-law's or her own childhood home for Christmas and family reunions. Hosting it at her place is a significant change. "Sounds exhausting," I respond with a lack of enthusiasm to Linda's arrogant tone, wondering how she plans to host people suddenly when we've always gathered elsewhere for such occasions. She frowns at me, looking like she's dealing with someone of lesser intelligence. "You're not just a bystander here. you'll be helping too. What? Come over on the 24th and help clean up. Your sisters-in-law will be there as well, and we'll need all the hands we can get. Stunned by Linda's audacious decision, I try to quickly object. But Mia is so young. Just use a baby carrier or something. That's how women used to do it back in the day. Maybe, but you're also in charge of the full-course Christmas meal. Don't you dare repackage store-bought food or cook anything that tastes bad. I don't want to be embarrassed. What? You can't be serious. I'm thinking of inviting Michael's dad's relatives on one day and my sister's family and our daughter on another. It'll be a busy holiday. Although she's complaining, I can sense a happy aura coming from her. Hold on, the one who's going to be busy is me, not you. As the daughter-in-law of this family's eldest son, do your duty properly, okay? Having had her say, my satisfied Linda leaves the meal untouched and heads out, leaving me stunned and my surprised son behind. She doesn't forget to pack the shrimp gratin that just needs to be baked, though. That night, when I tell Michael about it, he's as bewildered as I am. What? She's planning a party from Christmas, even inviting Dad's side of the family when he's not here? Yes, that's the plan. Well, maybe Mom's lonely. I finally lose my temper at Michael's predictable response. Think about what it's like for me, always being pushed around. Seeing Michael's face turn to an unmistakable, uh-oh, he goes silent. But even he realizes that this time it's too much and lets out a resigned sigh. All right, I'll handle the cleaning and entertaining the relatives. Really? I'm glad to hear Michael's proposal. It gives me some direction. But can you still cook the full-course Christmas meal? Just for this year, let's keep Mom's reputation intact. Plus, everyone in the family loves your cooking. As he pleads, Michael is staring at the meatloaf Linda left for us. I mean, it's hard to say no after making a concession. Fine, just for this year. Thanks, man. I can't wait for Sarah's Christmas feast. Geez, you're in high spirits, aren't you? Being praised isn't so bad, and I don't mind cooking for people, so I brace myself that it's just for this time and agree to prepare a full-course Christmas meal. When I tell Linda that Michael will stay over to help with cleaning, she makes a displeased face and says, "How could you let the man of the house do such things?" But he insisted, and I don't mind. She seemed reasonably satisfied seeing Michael bustling around at her parents' home for my sake. As the days passed, I found myself caught in the whirlwind of preparations for Linda's grand Christmas gathering. The pressure was building, and I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Linda's constant suggestions and instructions about the menu were driving me crazy. Sarah, don't forget the creamed spinach, and make sure to prepare a fancy salad. Oh, and we can't have Christmas without a traditional roast, can we? I nodded, feeling like I was slowly losing control over the holiday meal I had reluctantly agreed to prepare. It was supposed to be a collaborative effort with Linda, but it felt more like she was taking over everything. Michael tried to mediate between us, but it was challenging. He wanted to keep the peace and make everyone happy, but I could see the tension building in him as well. Our relationship was strained, and it seemed like Linda's presence was taking a toll on our marriage. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of shopping for ingredients and decorations, Michael and I sat down to talk. Sarah, I know this is tough, but please try to understand Mom's perspective. She's been through a lot since Dad passed away, and she's trying to hold on to some sense of normalcy. I sighed, feeling torn between my frustration and sympathy for Linda. I get that, Michael, but it feels like she's taking over everything. I agreed to cook the Christmas meal, but now it seems like she's planning the entire event without me. Michael looked conflicted, torn between supporting me and not wanting to upset his mother. I'll talk to her again, try to find a middle ground. But please, just for this Christmas, can you go along with her plans? It would mean a lot to her. I reluctantly agreed, hoping that this compromise would ease the tension in our family. As the days passed, I continued to prepare dishes for the feast, trying to balance Linda's demands with my own culinary preferences. It was a challenging task, but I was determined to make this Christmas special for everyone. However, the closer the holiday approached, the more I felt the weight of the expectations and the mounting pressure. I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake by agreeing to this in the first place. As Christmas Eve drew nearer, The stress of preparing for Linda's grand gathering began to take its toll on me. The pressure to meet her expectations weighed heavily on my shoulders. I spent countless hours in the kitchen, meticulously preparing each dish from scratch. The creamy spinach, fancy salad, traditional roast, and all the other items on Linda's extensive menu were lovingly cooked and garnished. Michael had tried his best to help, but he was also caught in the crossfire between his mother's demands and my desire for a peaceful holiday. The tension in our home was palpable. Even Lily and Mia seemed to sense the unease, their usual cheerful spirits somewhat dampened by the atmosphere. I knew I had to keep it together for their sake, but it was becoming increasingly challenging. On Christmas Eve morning, Linda arrived early, ready to supervise every detail of the preparations. She watched my every move as I put the finishing touches on the dishes. Her critical eye never left me, and I felt like I was being judged at every turn. As the hours passed, the house filled with the mouth-watering aroma of the Christmas feast. The table was set with care, adorned with festive decorations and flickering candles. Guests began to arrive, and the house buzzed with the excitement of the holiday. Despite my exhaustion and the mounting stress, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment as I looked at the beautifully presented dishes. This was my chance to prove myself, to show Linda that I could handle the responsibility she had entrusted me with. As the meal began, the first few bites were met with polite compliments from the guests. Linda's face lit up with satisfaction as she received praise for her meticulously planned Christmas gathering. I kept a watchful eye on Michael, who was doing his best to mediate between his mother and me. But as the meal progressed, something unexpected happened. Sophia, Linda's sister, began to compliment the dishes one by one, praising their flavors and presentation. She seemed genuinely impressed by the food. Sophia's words caught the attention of the other guests, and soon the entire table was filled with compliments and appreciation for the meal. Linda's smile faltered as she realized that the credit for the delicious food was being showered on me, not her. I watched as Linda's face turned from satisfaction to frustration. She had been so focused on maintaining her reputation as the perfect host that she hadn't noticed the genuine joy and gratitude from the guests. It was a bittersweet moment for me, as I had finally earned the recognition I craved, but it had come at the cost of Linda's disappointment. As the evening continued, the tension in the room grew, and it was clear that Linda was no longer enjoying the gathering. Michael tried to defuse the situation, but the damage had been done. In the end, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. I had proven myself as a capable cook and had earned the respect of Linda's relatives. It was a small victory, but it meant the world to me. As the guests departed, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for our family. The holiday had brought both joy and conflict, and it was clear that our relationship with Linda would never be the same. The days following the Christmas gathering were filled with a palpable tension in our household. Linda had been noticeably distant, and our interactions were strained. It was clear that she was still upset about the events of that evening. Michael, caught in the middle of the conflict between his mother and me, tried his best to mediate. He urged Linda to talk to me and address her feelings, but she remained stubbornly silent. One evening, after Linda had left our home, Michael and I sat down to discuss the situation. It had become increasingly clear that the rift between Linda and me needed to be resolved. "Sarah, I think it's time for a conversation with Mom," Michael said, his voice filled with concern. "This tension is tearing our family apart, and it's not healthy for any of us." I nodded in agreement, feeling the weight of the situation on my shoulders. "You're right, Michael. It's been hard on all of us, especially the kids. But I don't know how to approach her. She's been so distant and unwilling to talk." Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'll talk to her again and try to convince her to sit down with you. Maybe if I'm there as well, we can have an open and honest conversation." I appreciated Michael's willingness to help, and we made plans to confront Linda together. It was clear that something needed to change for the sake of our family's well-being. A few days later, we gathered in Linda's living room, the atmosphere heavy with tension. Linda looked uncomfortable, but she agreed to the meeting. Michael took the lead, addressing Linda gently but firmly. "Mom, we can't continue like this. The tension between you and Sarah is affecting all of us, especially the kids. We need to find a way to resolve our differences and move forward as a family." Linda remained silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the floor. Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with a mixture of frustration and sadness. "I just wanted everything to be perfect for Christmas. I didn't mean to overshadow Sarah's efforts or make her feel like she wasn't appreciated." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Linda, I understand that you wanted the best for the family, but it became overwhelming for me. I felt like my efforts were being dismissed, and it created a lot of stress. I just wanted to contribute to the holiday in my way." Tears welled up in Linda's eyes as she looked at me. "I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I never meant for it to come to this." We continued to talk, addressing our feelings and concerns openly and honestly. It was a difficult conversation, but it was also cathartic. Linda admitted that she had been struggling with her grief and had been trying to hold on to traditions to feel close to her late husband. In the end, we reached an understanding. We agreed to communicate better and find a way to celebrate holidays and family gatherings that honored both our traditions and contributions. It was a step toward healing the rift in our family. As the days passed, Linda and I gradually began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy, but we both recognized the importance of family and the need to support each other. Our family gatherings became more harmonious, and the tension that had once hung in the air began to dissipate. Looking back, I realized that the Christmas gathering had been a turning point for our family. It had forced us to confront our issues and work towards a resolution. While there were still challenges ahead, I knew that with open communication and a commitment to understanding each other, we could overcome anything that came our way. With the tensions of the Christmas gathering finally resolved, our family embarked on a new chapter of our lives. It was a period of healing, growth, and understanding, as we learned to appreciate each other's strengths and differences. Linda and I, once at odds, found a way to coexist peacefully. We learned to compromise and work together to create memorable family gatherings that celebrated both our traditions. It was a slow process, but the effort we put into our relationship was worth it, for the sake of our family. Michael, as the bridge between his mother and me, played a crucial role in maintaining the newfound harmony in our household. He continued to support and mediate, ensuring that both Linda and I felt heard and valued. Our children, Lily and Mia, thrived in the improved atmosphere at home. They were no longer caught in the crossfire of our disagreements and were free to be their joyful, carefree selves. Their laughter and innocence reminded us of the importance of family unity. As the months passed, our family traditions evolved. We began to create new holiday rituals that incorporated elements from both Linda's and my backgrounds. Our gatherings became a blend of flavors, customs, and celebrations that reflected our unique family dynamic. I continued to cook for our family, but now it was a collaborative effort. Linda and I would plan the menu together, each contributing our favorite dishes. It became a bonding experience that allowed us to connect on a deeper level. Our Christmas gatherings were no longer a source of tension, but a time of joy and togetherness. We focused on what truly mattered, the love and support we had for one another. The holiday season was a reminder of the strength of our family bonds. Looking back, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the challenges we had faced. They had forced us to confront our differences and work towards a better understanding of each other. Our family had emerged from the ordeal stronger and more united than ever. As the years went by, our family continued to grow and change. Lily and Mia were joined by a new sibling, a little brother named Max. Our household was filled with the laughter and chaos of raising 3 children, and our family traditions continued to evolve. Through it all, Linda, Michael, and I remained a united front, dedicated to providing our children with a loving and supportive environment. We had learned that family was not about perfection, but about embracing each other's imperfections and finding strength in our differences. And so our family journey continued, filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a brighter future. We had weathered the storms of the past and emerged stronger than ever, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.
My name is Lena Vance, and I learned the bitter taste of inadequacy in a sterile, antiseptic hospital room, cradling my newborn niece. My sister, Corinne, radiant despite the exhaustion of labor, beamed from the crisp white sheets. Our mother, Veronica, hovered over them both, a Madonna cradling her golden child.
Me?
I was a ghost in the corner, my congratulations hollow even to my own ears. Veronica barely glanced my way, her attention, her affection, reserved for Corinne and the tiny life she'd brought into the world. That day, the unspoken truth echoed louder than any celebratory cry. Corinne was the masterpiece, and I, the discarded sketch. Isn't she perfect, Lena? Veronica's voice dripped with a saccharine sweetness that always set my teeth on edge. She is. I managed my throat tight. Corinne's hand, delicate and manicured, rested on the baby's downy head. My own hands, calloused from long hours in the library and stained with ink from countless essays, felt clumsy and awkward. Just like her mother, my father, Grant, added, his eyes reflecting the same adoration Veronica held for Corinne. He'd always been a man of few words, but his silence spoke volumes. He never needed to say it. I knew I wasn't included in their little circle of perfection. Growing up, the comparisons were a constant hum beneath the surface of our seemingly idyllic lives. Corinne, the graceful swan, effortlessly gliding through ballet recitals and debutante balls. Me, the awkward duckling, forever tripping over my own 2 feet, my nose perpetually stuck in a book. Why can't you be more like your sister? Veronica would sigh, exasperated, as I presented her with another report card filled with A's, oblivious to the fact that my achievements were never enough to earn her approval. It wasn't the grades she cared about, it was the image, the effortless grace that Corinne exuded. Grant, lost in his world of mergers and acquisitions, remained emotionally distant. His presence was a shadow, looming large but offering no warmth. He saw us, his daughters, as extensions of himself, reflections of his success. Corinne, with her effortless charm and social graces, fit the mold. I, with my quiet intelligence and independent spirit, did not. My grandparents, Agnes and Walter Croft, were a different story. Their sprawling Victorian home, filled with the scent of baking bread and the comforting tick-tock of grandfather clocks, offered a refuge from the chill of the Vance household. Agnes, with her warm hugs and twinkling eyes, saw something in me that my parents didn't, a spark of something special. "You have a fire in you, Lena," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "Don't let anyone extinguish it." Walter, a retired judge with a stern demeanor but a kind heart, would sit with me for hours, discussing literature and history, fostering a love of learning that became my escape. "Knowledge is power, Lena," he'd tell me, his voice gruff but laced with affection. "Never underestimate its value." Their love, however, was a fragile shield against the constant barrage of criticism at home. There was always an undercurrent of tension, a subtle reminder that I was not truly one of them. Perhaps it was the hushed whispers behind closed doors, the strained smiles exchanged between my mother and Agnes, or the way Walter would sometimes look at me with a mixture of affection and pity. Whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that even in their sanctuary, I was an outsider, a guest in my own family. I was trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and privilege, yet starved for the one thing I craved most: acceptance. The summer I turned 16, Damon Thorne strolled into my life like a rogue wave, disrupting the stagnant waters of my existence. He was a friend of my father's, a self-made entrepreneur with a magnetic personality and a reputation that preceded him. He exuded an air of dangerous charm, a blend of sophistication and rebellion that both intrigued and intimidated me. Our first encounter was at a charity gala, an event I dreaded attending. Surrounded by chattering socialites and their preening escorts, I felt like a specimen under a microscope. Damon, noticing my discomfort, detached himself from a group of investors and approached me with a glass of champagne in hand. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he remarked, a twinkle in his eye. "You have no idea," I muttered, taking a hesitant sip of the bubbly liquid. He chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. Then why are you here? Parental obligation, I replied dryly. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. We talked for hours that night, discussing everything from literature and philosophy to business and politics. He listened with an intensity that made me feel seen, truly seen for the first time in my life. Damon became a fixture in my life, a mentor, a confidant, a much-needed escape from the suffocating atmosphere of my home. He encouraged my intellectual curiosity, nurtured my ambition, and validated my feelings of inadequacy in a way that no one else ever had. He saw the potential that my family so readily dismissed. "You're sharper than your father, Lena," he'd say, his voice low and conspiratorial, and twice as ambitious. "Don't let them hold you back." He introduced me to a world beyond debutante balls and country club luncheons, a world of art galleries, independent films, and late-night conversations fueled by strong coffee and even stronger opinions. He opened my eyes to the inequalities of the world, the subtle yet pervasive injustices that simmered beneath the surface of our privileged lives. But even then, cracks were beginning to show in Damon's carefully constructed facade. Whispers followed him like shadows, rumors of shady deals, ruthless business tactics, and a string of broken hearts left in his wake. I chose to ignore them, blinded by my own need for acceptance and validation. He was the first person to truly believe in me, and I clung to that belief like a lifeline. Meanwhile, Corinne, despite her outward perfection, was starting to unravel. The pressure of being the golden child was taking its toll. Behind the flawless makeup and designer clothes, a deep-seated insecurity festered. She confided in me one night, her voice barely above a whisper, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. "It's all a lie, Lena," she confessed, her eyes filled with a desperate sadness. "I'm not who they think I am." I wanted to comfort her, to offer her the same solace that Damon offered me, but a wall of resentment stood between us, built on years of unspoken rivalry and perceived favoritism. I couldn't bring myself to bridge the gap, to admit that I, too, felt like an imposter in my own life. The cracks in the Vance family's carefully curated image were starting to widen, threatening to shatter the illusion of perfection they'd so meticulously crafted. My father's investments, once a source of pride and boasting, began to sour. The whispers in the country club grew louder, laced with speculation and thinly veiled schadenfreude. My mother, usually so composed, became increasingly agitated, her anxieties spilling over in sharp words and irrational demands. And Damon, ever the opportunist, watched from the sidelines, his eyes gleaming with a predatory glint. He offered my father advice, whispered strategies, and consolidated his influence within the family. His presence became a constant, a shadow lurking in the corners of our lives, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. One evening, he pulled me aside, his expression serious. "Your father is in trouble, Lena," he said, his voice low and urgent. Deeper than he realizes. My stomach dropped. I knew things weren't good, but the fear in Damon's eyes told me the situation was far worse than I'd imagined. He went on to explain the complexities of my father's failing investments, the precarious position he was in, and the potential consequences for our family. He offered me a choice, a veiled ultimatum that would forever alter the course of my life. "You can stand by and watch your family crumble," he said, his voice laced with a chilling calmness. "Or you can join me, and we can build something new, something stronger, something that can't be broken." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken promises and dangerous possibilities. I was trapped between loyalty to a family that had never truly accepted me and the allure of a future free from their suffocating expectations. The gilded cage was about to shatter, and I had to decide whether to stay amidst the ruins or forge my own path, even if it meant walking hand in hand with the devil himself. The catalyst arrived in the form of a hushed phone call in the dead of night. My mother's voice, strained and brittle, shattered the fragile peace of my sleep. "Your father, he's gone." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. He hadn't simply gone. He'd vanished, leaving behind a gaping hole in our lives and a mountain of debt that threatened to bury us alive. The carefully constructed facade of the Vance family crumbled overnight. The whispers turned into shouts, the speculation into accusations. The social circles that had once embraced us now shunned us, their sympathy as thin and brittle as the ice on a winter pond. Veronica, stripped of her social standing and financial security, became a ghost of her former self, drifting through the hollow shell of our once grand home. Corinne, her carefully curated world shattered, retreated into a haze of denial and self-pity. The pressure of being the perfect daughter, the burden of upholding the family's crumbling image, proved too much to bear. She turned to alcohol and fleeting romances, seeking solace in the arms of men who saw her not as a person, but as a symbol of her family's former glory. It was Damon who stepped in, seemingly to pick up the pieces. He offered legal advice, financial assistance, and a shoulder to cry on for my distraught mother. He orchestrated the sale of our family home, a necessary but painful act that severed the last tangible link to our past. He even secured a place for Corinne in a prestigious rehab facility, shielding her from the prying eyes of the media and the judgment of our former social circle. His actions, on the surface, appeared altruistic, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a deeper game, manipulating the chaos to his advantage. My unease grew with each passing day, fueled by his cryptic remarks and knowing glances. "Your father made some unwise decisions, Lena," he'd say, his voice laced with a mixture of pity and something darker, something that resembled satisfaction. "But every crisis presents an opportunity." He began to involve me in his business dealings, introducing me to his network of investors and lawyers. He taught me the language of finance, the art of negotiation, the subtle but powerful ways to leverage power and influence. He was grooming me, molding me into his protege, his accomplice. "You're a Vance, Lena," he'd remind me. "You have the blood of a winner in your veins. Don't let your father's mistakes define you." I threw myself into my work, desperate to prove him right, to reclaim some semblance of control in a world that had been turned upside down. I learned quickly, absorbing information like a sponge, my ambition fueled by a potent cocktail of resentment and a desire to prove my family wrong. One evening, Damon took me to a clandestine meeting in a dimly lit back room of an exclusive club. The air was thick with cigar smoke and hushed whispers. Men in expensive suits and women in glittering gowns exchanged knowing glances, their conversations laced with coded language I was only beginning to understand. He introduced me to a group of investors, their eyes assessing me with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "This is Lena Vance," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "She's going to change the game." That night, I stepped into a world of power and influence, a world where fortunes were made and broken on a whim. I embraced the challenge, the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I navigated the treacherous landscape of high-stakes deals and cutthroat negotiations. But the further I delved into Damon's world, the more I realized the true extent of his morally ambiguous nature. The whispers I'd once ignored now echoed in my ears, amplified by my growing understanding of his business practices. He wasn't simply a shrewd businessman. He was a manipulator, a master puppeteer pulling the strings of those around him, including me. He'd used my family's misfortune to his advantage, preying on their vulnerability to consolidate his power and expand his empire. He'd offered me a lifeline, but it was a lifeline attached to a noose, slowly tightening around my neck. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I'd been so focused on escaping the gilded cage of my family that I'd walked blindly into another, one built not of gold, but of shadows and deceit. I was trapped, caught in a web of my own making, and the architect of my prison was the man I'd once considered my savior. The question was, did I have the strength to break free, or would I become another casualty in Damon Thorne's ruthless pursuit of power? The guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder of my complicity in Damon's schemes. I'd justified my actions as a means of survival, a way to rebuild my life from the ashes of my family's downfall. But deep down, I knew I was playing a dangerous game, one that could cost me my soul. Despite the moral quagmire, My ambition burned brighter than ever. Damon, sensing my internal conflict, pushed me harder, challenging me to embrace my ruthlessness, to shed the last vestiges of my naive idealism. Sentimentality is a weakness, Lena, he'd sneer, his eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. In this world, you either devour or you're devoured. He threw me into the deep end, entrusting me with increasingly complex deals, testing my limits, pushing me to the brink of my moral capacity. I learned to negotiate with sharks, to anticipate their every move, to outmaneuver them at their own game. I discovered a hidden talent for strategy, a knack for seeing the angles that others missed. I was good, terrifyingly good, and the rush of power that came with each successful deal was intoxicating. I built my own empire, brick by bloody brick, on the foundations of my family's ruin. I launched a tech startup, leveraging Damon's connections and capitalizing on the burgeoning digital landscape. My company, Phoenix Innovations, became a symbol of my resilience, a testament to my ability to rise from the ashes. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd become everything my family had never wanted me to be: independent, successful, and powerful. The media, ever hungry for a good redemption story, lapped it up. I became the it girl of the tech world, gracing magazine covers and delivering keynote speeches at prestigious conferences. My name became synonymous with innovation, disruption, and the audacity to defy expectations. The gilded cage I'd once yearned to escape was replaced by a throne of my own making. But the higher I climbed, the more isolated I became. The friends I'd made along the way were drawn to the allure of my success, their loyalty contingent on my continued ascent. The genuine connections I craved remained elusive, replaced by a network of superficial relationships built on ambition and mutual benefit. My relationship with Damon, once a source of strength and validation, became increasingly strained. He saw my growing independence as a threat, his possessiveness masked by a veneer of mentorship. He attempted to control my every move, to dictate the direction of my company, to remind me that my success was inextricably linked to his influence. "Don't forget who paved the way for you, Lena," he'd say, his voice laced with a thinly veiled warning. Loyalty is a two-way street. I chafed under his control, the resentment simmering beneath the surface. I'd become the very thing I'd once despised: a manipulator, a player in a game with no real winners. The guilt I'd tried to suppress resurfaced with a vengeance, amplified by the growing realization that I'd become a pawn in Damon's grand scheme. One evening, he summoned me to his penthouse office overlooking the city. The sprawling cityscape, a tapestry of glittering lights and towering skyscrapers, seemed to mock the emptiness I felt inside. He poured me a glass of expensive scotch, his movements deliberate, his eyes studying me with an unsettling intensity. "I have a proposition for you, Lena," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "One that will solidify your position at the top." He outlined a plan, a complex and audacious scheme that would crush our competitors and cement our dominance in the industry. It was brilliant, ruthless, and undeniably illegal. My stomach churned as I listened, the moral implications of his proposal weighing heavily on my conscience. "I can't do this, Damon," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It's too much." He chuckled, a low, menacing sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "You've come too far to back out now, Lena," he said, his eyes hardening. "You're already in too deep." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Besides, wouldn't you like to see your family suffer just a little bit more?" His words struck a nerve, exposing the raw, festering wound of my resentment. The image of my mother's tear-stained face, of Curran's lost and vacant eyes, flashed before me. The desire for revenge, a dark and insidious force I'd tried to suppress, surged through my veins. I knew in that moment that I was at a crossroads. I could choose to walk away, to salvage what remained of my integrity, or I could succumb to the darkness, embrace the monster I was becoming, and unleash my fury on the family that had cast me aside. The unveiling was a slow, agonizing burn. My success, once a shield against my family's indifference, became a spotlight, illuminating the chasm that separated us. News of Phoenix Innovations' meteoric rise reached the ears of my estranged family, drawing them back into my orbit like moths to a flame. Veronica, her pride wounded but her desperation palpable, was the first to make contact. She called, her voice a fragile echo of its former imperiousness, feigning concern for my well-being, expressing a belated pride in my accomplishments. I listened, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest, recognizing the thinly veiled plea for financial assistance beneath her carefully chosen words. "It's good to hear from you, Mother," I replied, my voice devoid of warmth. We arranged a lunch, a stilted and uncomfortable affair in a trendy restaurant frequented by the city's elite. She arrived dressed in a faded imitation of her former elegance, her eyes scanning the room, searching for familiar faces, for a glimmer of her lost social standing. "You've done well for yourself, Lena," she said, her voice laced with a forced cheerfulness. "Your father would have been so proud." The mention of my father, the man whose absence had shaped my life, tightened the knot of resentment in my stomach. I didn't respond, letting the silence hang heavy between us. Corinne, fresh out of rehab, followed suit. She looked healthier, her eyes clearer, but a shadow of her former vibrancy remained. She apologized for her past behavior, for the petty jealousies and rivalries that had defined our relationship. Her words sounded sincere, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she, too, was driven by a hidden agenda. "I'm happy for you, Lena," she said, her voice hesitant. Truly, I wanted to believe her, to forgive her, to rebuild the sisterhood we'd never had. But the years of neglect and resentment had carved a deep chasm between us. Even Grant, or rather, the ghost of Grant, resurfaced. A letter arrived, postmarked from a small island in the Caribbean, a place where he'd apparently been hiding from his creditors and the wreckage of his former life. He wrote of regret, of remorse, of a belated recognition of his failings as a father. He asked for forgiveness, for a chance to reconnect, to make amends for the past. His words rang hollow, a desperate attempt to absolve himself of his sins. Their sudden reappearance, their feigned support, only fueled my desire for revenge. Damon, sensing my resolve, offered his guidance, his expertise in the art of manipulation. He helped me orchestrate a plan, a subtle but devastating campaign to expose their hypocrisy and dismantle their carefully constructed illusions. "They want a piece of the pie, Lena," he said, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "Let's give them what they want, but on our terms." I used my newfound wealth and influence to lure them back into my life, dangling the promise of financial security and social redemption. I offered Veronica a position on the board of Phoenix Innovations, a symbolic gesture that would restore her social standing but give her no real power. I funded Corinne's passion project, a fashion line that I knew was doomed to fail, a subtle way to expose her lack of talent and business acumen. I even responded to Grant's letter, offering him a chance to return, to face the consequences of his actions, and to witness the empire I'd built from the ashes of his destruction. The Vance family, blinded by their own greed and desperation, walked willingly into my trap. They reveled in the reflected glory of my success, oblivious to the fact that they were dancing on a stage of my design, playing roles I had carefully scripted. The climax arrived at the launch party for Corinne's fashion line. The venue was packed with industry insiders, socialites, and members of the press. Corinne, dressed in a creation of her own design, radiated a nervous excitement, her eyes searching for validation, for a sign that she'd finally escaped her family's shadow. I watched from the sidelines, a glass of champagne in hand, my expression carefully neutral. As the evening progressed, the cracks in Corinne's carefully constructed facade began to show. The collection, a mishmash of ill-fitting garments and questionable design choices, was met with polite applause and thinly veiled criticism. The whispers started, the same whispers that had once haunted my childhood, now directed at my sister. The final blow came when a prominent fashion blogger, known for her scathing reviews, took to the stage, microphone in hand. She eviscerated the collection, her words dripping with sarcasm and disdain, exposing Corinne's lack of talent for all the world to see. Corinne, her face pale and tear-streaked, fled the stage, her dreams of fashion glory crumbling around her. Veronica and Grant, their faces masks of horrified disbelief, watched from the front row, their carefully crafted image of familial success shattered beyond repair. I met their gazes, my eyes cold and hard, the years of resentment and hurt boiling to the surface. The gilded cage they had built for me had finally collapsed, and they were trapped inside, exposed and vulnerable, at my mercy. The game was far from over, but I had finally taken control. The hunter had become the hunted. The reckoning was swift and brutal. Curran's public humiliation was just the opening salvo in my carefully orchestrated campaign of revenge. I'd studied Damon's tactics, learned from the master manipulator himself, and now I was putting those lessons to devastating use. My next target was Veronica. I leaked information to the press about her involvement in a shady charity, revealing her embezzlement of funds and her hypocrisy in presenting herself as a philanthropic socialite. The scandal erupted, her reputation tarnished beyond repair. The social circles that had once embraced her now turned their backs, their whispers laced with disgust and schadenfreude. She became a pariah, ostracized and alone, stripped of the social status she held so dear. Grant, still clinging to the hope of reconciliation and a share of my newfound wealth, proved to be the easiest target. I presented him with a carefully worded contract, offering him a substantial sum of money in exchange for a full confession of his financial misdeeds and his abandonment of his family. He signed without hesitation, blinded by greed and oblivious to the trap I'd laid. I then leaked the confession to the authorities, ensuring that he would face the legal consequences of his actions. He fled the country, a disgraced fugitive, his dreams of a comfortable retirement replaced by the harsh reality of life on the run. With my parents neutralized, I turned my attention to the silent accomplices in their cruelty, my grandparents. Agnes and Walter, despite their moments of kindness, had ultimately chosen to protect their daughter, turning a blind eye to her emotional abuse and enabling her destructive behavior. I confronted them in their Victorian home, the scent of baking bread now replaced by the stale odor of decay and regret. I laid bare the years of hurt, the scars of their indifference, the pain of their complicity. Agnes, her eyes filled with tears, attempted to defend her actions, clinging to the maternal instinct to protect her child. Walter, his face etched with shame, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the worn Persian rug beneath his feet. "You knew," I accused, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You knew what she was doing to me, and you did nothing." The confrontation was a cathartic release, a purging of the years of unspoken resentment. It didn't bring me the satisfaction I'd craved, but it did bring a sense of closure, a final severing of the ties that bound me to my toxic family. But my victory was short-lived. As the dust settled, as the wreckage of my family's lives lay scattered around me, I began to question the cost of my revenge. The emptiness I'd felt before intensified, amplified by the realization that I'd become the very thing I despised, a manipulator, a destroyer of lives. And then the final blow. Damon, his eyes gleaming with a chilling triumph, revealed the true extent of his manipulation. He'd orchestrated my father's downfall, deliberately sabotaging his investments to create the chaos that had propelled me into his orbit. He'd used me, exploited my vulnerability and my desire for revenge, to further his own ambitions. "You were a pawn in my game, Lena," he confessed, his voice devoid of remorse. "A means to an end." His betrayal cut deeper than any wound inflicted by my family. He'd been my mentor, my confidant, the one person I thought I could trust. Now I saw him for who he truly was, a predator, a master manipulator who had used my pain for his own gain. The realization shattered me, the weight of my actions crushing me beneath its weight. I'd sought revenge, but all I'd found was ashes, the remnants of a life consumed by anger and resentment. I destroyed my family, but in doing so, I'd also destroyed myself. I confronted him, the fury coursing through my veins giving me a strength I didn't know I possessed. I accused him of his treachery, his manipulation, his utter disregard for human decency. He laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed in the opulent emptiness of his penthouse office. "You're just like me, Lena," he said, his eyes mocking me. "You just haven't learned to embrace it yet." His words struck a nerve, a terrifying truth I could no longer deny. I had become a monster, a reflection of the very people I'd sought to destroy. The gilded cage had been replaced by a prison of my own making, and the bars were forged, not of gold, but of my own bitterness and rage. I was trapped, alone, and lost in the darkness of my own creation. The question now wasn't how to escape, but whether I could find a way to forgive myself, to salvage what remained of my soul, and to rebuild a life worth living. The price of silence was a deafening roar in my ears. Damon's betrayal had shattered the last vestiges of my carefully constructed world, leaving me adrift in a sea of doubt and self-loathing. I'd become a mirror image of the people I despised, a manipulator, a destroyer, a prisoner of my own rage. I retreated from the world, seeking refuge in the quiet solitude of my apartment. The city lights, once a symbol of my triumph, now seemed to mock my isolation. The silence of my apartment was broken only by the ghosts of my past, the whispers of my conscience, the relentless accusations of my own guilt. I needed to confront the truth, to face the wreckage I'd created. I started with Veronica and Grant. I arranged a meeting, not in a public space, but in the ruins of our former family home, a stark reminder of the life we'd lost. The house was a hollow shell, stripped of its former grandeur, the air thick with dust and the memories of happier times. Veronica sat on a packing crate, her face etched with lines of weariness and regret. Grant paced nervously, his eyes darting around the room, as if searching for an escape. I began, my voice trembling slightly. "I know about Damon, about his role in Dad's downfall." The silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath Grant's restless feet. He finally stopped pacing, his eyes meeting mine, a flicker of fear in their depths. He promised," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "He promised he could save us." Veronica remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The truth, raw and ugly, hung in the air between us. They'd been willing participants in their own destruction, blinded by their greed and their misplaced trust in a man who had used them both. I told them everything about Damon's manipulation, about my own complicity, about the years of resentment that had fueled my desire for revenge. The confession was a painful but necessary act, a purging of the poison that had festered within me for so long. The confrontation with my grandparents was even more difficult. They'd retreated further into their world of denial, clinging to the belief that their daughter was blameless, that I was the architect of my own misfortune. I didn't spare them the details, recounting the years of subtle but damaging emotional neglect, the constant comparisons to Corinne, the silent complicity that had allowed the cycle of abuse to continue. Agnes wept, her frail body shaking with sobs, her cries a mixture of grief and guilt. Walter, his face pale and drawn, finally broke his silence. He confessed to a long-held secret, a truth that shattered the last vestiges of my idealized image of my family. He revealed that I wasn't Grant's biological daughter. My real father was a man he'd met during a business trip, a fleeting affair he'd kept hidden for years. A secret that had shaped my life in ways I was only beginning to understand. The revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow, the ground shifting beneath my feet. It explained so much, the emotional distance, the lack of connection, the constant feeling of being an outsider in my own family. The truth, however painful, was also liberating. It freed me from the shackles of my family's expectations, from the burden of their judgment. I was no longer Lena Vance, the discarded sketch, the unwanted daughter. I was simply Lena, a woman forged in the fires of adversity, a survivor who had finally found her own voice. The pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place, revealing a picture far more complex and disturbing than I could have ever imagined. Damon had known about my true parentage, had used that knowledge to manipulate me, to fuel my resentment, to turn me into his weapon of revenge. I left the Croft house, the weight of the past lifting from my shoulders. The rage that had consumed me for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a profound sense of sadness, a quiet understanding of the complexities of family and the enduring power of secrets. The journey to healing had begun, a long and arduous path that would require me to confront my own demons and to forgive not only my family, but also myself. The gilded cage had been shattered, the prison of my own making dismantled. I was free, finally free, to build a future based not on revenge, but on self-acceptance and the promise of a new beginning. The echoes of the past reverberated through me, a constant reminder of the choices I'd made and the price I'd paid for revenge. The Vance family, once a monolithic symbol of wealth and privilege, was in ruins. Veronica, stripped of her social standing and financial security, found solace in volunteer work, her arrogance replaced by a quiet humility. Grant, a fugitive from justice, lived a solitary existence, haunted by the ghosts of his past mistakes. Corinne, humbled by her public failure, discovered a genuine talent for design, not in the glamorous world of high fashion, but in creating functional and affordable clothing for women in need. She found redemption not in the spotlight, but in the quiet satisfaction of using her skills to empower others. Agnes and Walter, their health failing, spent their remaining days in quiet contemplation, grappling with the consequences of their silence and the belated realization of the pain they had inflicted. They reached out to me, offering a genuine apology, a heartfelt expression of regret for the role they'd played in my suffering. I accepted their apology, not because I'd forgiven them completely, but because I recognized the futility of clinging to the past. Damon, his empire built on deceit and manipulation, eventually faced his own reckoning. His shady dealings came to light, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of his own greed. He was arrested, his reign of power brought to an abrupt and ignominious end. I watched the news reports with a strange detachment, feeling neither satisfaction nor triumph, only a weary sense of finality. I sold Phoenix Innovations, severing my ties to the world that Damon had created, the world that had almost consumed me. The money, once a symbol of my success and my revenge, now felt tainted, a reminder of the compromises I'd made. I donated a significant portion to various charities, focusing on organizations that supported women and children escaping abusive situations. It wasn't an act of atonement, but a small step towards rebuilding my life on a foundation of compassion and empathy. I left the city, seeking refuge in the quiet solitude of the countryside. I bought a small cottage, surrounded by rolling hills and fields of wildflowers, a place where I could finally breathe, where the echoes of the past were softened by the gentle whispers of the wind. I started writing, pouring my experiences onto the page, transforming the pain and anger into stories of resilience and hope. I wrote about the complexities of family, the enduring power of forgiveness, the importance of finding your own voice in a world that often tries to silence you. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I sat on my porch, watching the leaves turn vibrant shades of red and gold, I received a letter. It was from Corinne. She wrote of her newfound purpose, her passion for helping others, her gratitude for the second chance she'd been given. She wrote of forgiveness, of a desire to rebuild our relationship, to finally forge the sisterhood we'd never had. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the sun wash over me, a sense of peace settling in my heart. The journey had been long and arduous, a descent into darkness followed by a slow and painful climb towards the light. I'd made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I'd also learned valuable lessons about the destructive nature of revenge, the importance of self-acceptance, and the enduring power of hope. I wrote back to Corinne, a simple message of acceptance, an invitation to visit, a promise of a new beginning. I didn't know what the future held, but I faced it with a newfound sense of clarity and purpose. I was no longer defined by my family's expectations, by Damon's manipulation, or by the mistakes of my past. I was Lena, a survivor, a storyteller, a woman who had finally found her own way home. My legacy wouldn't be one of wealth or power, but one of resilience, compassion, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The gilded cage was gone, replaced by the boundless expanse of a future filled with possibility, a future I was finally free to create.
The shrimp scampi glistened on my plate, innocent and deadly. I stared at it, my throat already starting to close up, while my mother-in-law, Evelyn, beamed from across the table with what anyone else might mistake for genuine warmth. My name is Victoria, and I was about to find out just how far a mother would go to keep her son. I specifically asked about shellfish, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. The first hints of panic crept in as I felt the familiar tingle on my lips. You promised me it was safe. Ryan's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. Mom, you knew about Victoria's allergy. We've talked about this dozens of times. Evelyn's perfectly manicured fingers fluttered to her chest. Oh dear, did I forget? I could have sworn you said it was just a mild sensitivity. You've been so particular about everything since the pregnancy. The EpiPen. Where was my damn EpiPen? I fumbled through my purse, the room starting to spin. The baby kicked, as if sensing my distress. It's never been mild, Ryan snapped, pushing back from the table. Where's your EpiPen, Vic? Martin, my father-in-law, watched the scene unfold with quiet horror from his end of the table. Nathan, Ryan's brother, seemed more interested in his wine glass than the fact that I was struggling to breathe. I must have left it in the car, I wheezed. Stupid mistake. Never trust Evelyn's cooking. How many times had Claire warned me? I'll get it, Ryan said, already halfway to the door. Really, Victoria, Evelyn sighed, dabbing her lips with a napkin. Perhaps if you weren't so anxious all the time, these things wouldn't happen. Stress isn't good for the baby. The room tilted sideways. My hands clutched the edge of the table, knuckles white. Through the growing fog, I caught the slight upturn of Evelyn's lips, that flash of satisfaction in her eyes, before concern masked it. Someone call an ambulance, Martin finally spoke up, his voice cutting through the chaos. I felt hands guiding me to the floor, heard Ryan's panicked return, the sharp sting of the EpiPen in my thigh. As the medication fought against my closing airways, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. This wasn't a mistake. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency room lights and monitors. Ryan never left my side, his face etched with worry and something else. Doubt, maybe, or the first cracks in his unwavering defense of his mother. The baby's fine, the doctor assured us for the third time. But Mrs. Henderson, you need to be more careful. With your severity of allergies, even cross-contamination could be fatal. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the dinner scene. The way Evelyn had insisted on serving me herself, how she'd watched, waiting, as I lifted that first forkful. I swear, Vic, I'll talk to her, Ryan said once we were alone. This can't happen again. I turned to look at him, really look at him, wondering if he could see what I already knew. It wasn't an accident. Don't say that. Mom would never, wouldn't she? My hand rested on my swollen belly, protective. Think about it, Ryan. She's never accepted me, and now there's a baby coming. A baby that will take even more of your attention away from her. He shook his head, but I saw the doubt in his eyes deepen. That's crazy. She's not capable of murder. The word hung between us like poison. Maybe not, but she's definitely capable of sending a message. The hospital room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitors. Outside, a nurse walked past, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. Ryan's phone buzzed, probably Evelyn, checking to see if her plan had worked. I won't let her hurt you again, he finally said, but we both knew it wasn't that simple. I closed my eyes, exhausted but mind-racing. If Evelyn wanted a war, she'd get one, but this time I'd be ready. This time, I'd make sure she understood exactly what it meant to mess with a mother protecting her child. 3 days after the dinner incident, I sat in Claire's kitchen, watching her pace with the kind of righteous anger only best friends can muster. The afternoon sun caught the silver highlights in her dark hair as she moved, making her look like she was crackling with electricity. "She tried to kill you," Claire said for the third time, slamming her coffee mug down. "And Ryan's still making excuses?" I traced the rim of my own mug, remembering the conversation with my husband that morning. "He says we need to give her another chance, that she's been under stress lately." "Stress?" Claire's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "I've treated patients under stress. They take up yoga, not attempted murder." My phone buzzed. Another message from Evelyn. "Just checking on my favorite daughter-in-law. Those pregnancy hormones can make anyone overreact. Let's have tea tomorrow and talk." I showed Claire the message. Her eyes narrowed as she read it, professional assessment mixing with personal fury. "Classic gaslighting. She's trying to make you doubt yourself." "It's working on Ryan," I admitted. "This morning, he suggested maybe I did overreact. That may be cross-contamination." "Stop." Claire grabbed my hands across the table. "You know what cross-contamination looks like. You've lived with this allergy your whole life. Trust your instincts." The baby kicked, as if agreeing. I pressed a hand to my stomach, remembering the fear in the emergency room, not just for myself, but for my child. "Ryan's coming to the next ultrasound. Evelyn offered to come too." "Absolutely not." "That's what I said, but Ryan thinks it would help us bond." Claire's phone chimed, her reminder for her hospital shift. As she gathered her things, she fixed me with the same look she probably gave difficult patients. "Document everything. Every text, every call, every accidental incident. Build your case." After she left, I sat alone in her quiet kitchen, thinking about patterns I'd dismissed over the past 3 years. The wedding cake that mysteriously contained almond extract, despite our explicit instructions. The Christmas dinner where Evelyn forgot to tell me about the seafood stuffing. Small things, easily explained away, building to this. My phone buzzed again. "Ryan." "Mom wants to apologize properly," he said when I answered. "She's planning a special dinner." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "Vic, she feels terrible. She's crying." "Of course she is." I stood up, needing to move. "Ryan, think about it. Why would she plan another dinner when I just had an allergic reaction? Why not just call or visit?" Silence stretched between us. When he spoke again, his voice was strained. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your mother is playing a game and you're letting her. That's not fair." His architect voice now, the one he used when presenting difficult concepts to clients. "She's trying to make amends. By putting me in the exact same situation. That's not making amends. That's testing boundaries." More silence. I could almost see him at his office, running his hands through his hair the way he did when stressed. Finally, "Come to dinner, please, for me. I'll check everything myself, I promise." "No." I gathered my things, heading for my car. "I love you, Ryan, but I won't put our baby at risk to make your mother feel better." "Vic, I have to go. I have a client meeting." A lie, but I needed space to think. As I drove home, another text from Evelyn arrived. "Ryan tells me you're still upset. I raised him to be more forgiving than this. I hope pregnancy isn't affecting your judgment too much." I pulled over, my hands shaking as I read it again. The subtle dig about raising Ryan, the implied criticism of my maternal instincts, the continued suggestion that I was being irrational, all perfectly crafted to drive a wedge between us. Claire was right. I needed evidence. Opening my phone's notes app, I started documenting everything I could remember, starting with the wedding cake. 3 years of accidents and misunderstandings filled the screen. Looking at it all laid out, I felt something shift inside me. Not just anger or fear, but clarity. Evelyn had declared war the moment I married her son, and I'd been too busy trying to keep the peace to notice. Well, if she wanted war, I'd give her one. But first, I needed allies. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Martin's number. It was time to have a conversation with my father-in-law about his wife's cooking habits. Martin met me at a coffee shop across town, far from any of Evelyn's usual haunts. His hands trembled slightly as he stirred his coffee, the spoon making tiny circles that seemed to echo his hesitation. "I should have spoken up sooner," he said, his engineer's precision making each word deliberate. The Christmas when Nathan's wife left, that wasn't just about their marriage problems. I leaned forward, my untouched decaf growing cold. "What do you mean? Sarah had a peanut allergy. Not as severe as yours, but—" He set the spoon down with a soft clink. "There was an incident. Evelyn insisted it was an accident." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Sarah left right after Christmas dinner. Nathan never questioned it. He always sides with his mother. Martin's eyes met mine, carrying years of silent witness. But I saw Evelyn in the kitchen that day. She was particular about which plates went where. My phone buzzed, another text from Ryan. "Mum's really trying, Vic. She's even taking a cooking class focused on allergy awareness." I showed Martin the message. His laugh was hollow. "She took a similar class after the Sarah incident, made a big show of it." "Does Ryan know about Sarah?" Nathan told him it was about the affair, the one that never actually happened. Martin pulled out his wallet, extracting a folded piece of paper. "I've kept records, dates, incidents, patterns. I'm an engineer. We document everything." My hands shook as I unfolded it. Detailed notes spanning 15 years. Family members who'd challenged Evelyn, subsequent accidents, careful observations of her behavior. The methodical documentation of a man who'd watched helplessly as his wife systematically eliminated threats to her control. "Why didn't you stop her?" "I tried once." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a faint scar. "Carbon monoxide leak in the garage. Another accident. After that, I started documenting instead of confronting." The baby kicked hard, making me wince. Martin noticed. "She's escalating because of the baby," he said quietly. "A grandchild she can't control. Born to a mother she can't manipulate." My phone buzzed again. Evelyn this time. "Found the perfect recipe for your baby shower. Don't worry, I'm being extra careful about ingredients. Ryan says you're still not returning my calls. Pregnancy can make us so emotional, can't it?" Something in me snapped. I pulled up the photos I'd been gathering, screenshots of her texts, pictures from past events, medical records from my ER visit. "I'm building a case," I told Martin. "I need your help." He stared at his coffee cup for a long moment. "It won't be enough. Evelyn was a principal for 30 years. She knows how to cover her tracks, how to make others doubt their own perceptions. Why do you think Nathan still believes Sarah cheated?" "Then what do I do? Wait for her to succeed?" "No." He slid his notes across the table. "You fight smarter. Use her patterns against her." I studied the papers more carefully, seeing what he meant. Every incident had a similar structure. The subtle undermining, the public display of concern, the way she turned witnesses into unwitting accomplices. "The baby shower," I said slowly. "She's already setting it up." Martin nodded. "She'll want to host it. Control the food, the guests, the narrative. Unless someone else already planned it." I pulled out my phone, texting Claire. "Need your help with something big. Be careful," Martin warned. "Evelyn's most dangerous when she feels trapped." "So am I." I gathered the papers, tucking them safely away. And unlike Sarah, I have proof, and witnesses. As if on cue, my phone lit up with Claire's response. "Already on it. Got some interesting info from a nurse who worked with your MIL years ago. Call me ASAP." Martin stood to leave, then hesitated. "Victoria, Ryan's a good man, but he's been under her influence his whole life. Whatever you're planning—" "I know." I rested my hand on my stomach, feeling the baby move. "But this isn't just about me anymore." He nodded once, understanding. As he walked away, my phone buzzed with another message from Ryan. "Mum's crying again. Please just talk to her." I started typing a response, then stopped. Instead, I forwarded him a single photo, the hospital monitor from the night of the dinner, showing our baby's heartbeat racing as my body fought the allergic reaction. Sometimes the truth needs no words, and sometimes the most effective revenge is simply bringing secrets into the light. I opened my notes app and added one more entry. Time to let Evelyn host that baby shower after all. I found the pregnancy test in Evelyn's bathroom trash can while searching for aspirin during a mandatory Sunday brunch. Pink lines still visible, receipt from yesterday crumpled beside it. My hands shook as I snapped a photo, mind racing through possibilities, each worse than the last. Claire's voice echoed in my head. Document everything. Downstairs, Ryan and his mother were looking at old photo albums, her voice carrying up the stairs in that honeyed tone she used when strengthening her hold on him. I pressed my hand against my 7-month bump, fighting waves of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. My phone buzzed. A text from Nathan's number, but the message stopped me cold. "This is Sarah. We need to talk. Today." I typed back quickly. "Corner cafe on 5th, 1 hour." Descending the stairs, I caught the end of Evelyn's conversation. "And then we'll convert the guest room into a proper nursery. That way I can help more with the baby." "Actually," I interrupted, "we've already started the nursery at home." Evelyn's smile tightened. "But you'll need help, dear. First-time mothers always do." Ryan squeezed my hand. "Mum's just trying to help, Vic. I know exactly what she's trying to do." The words came out sharper than intended. I grabbed my purse. "I have to go. Client meeting." "On Sunday?" Evelyn's eyebrows rose with practiced concern. "You're working too hard. It's not good for—" "The baby. Yes, I know. You never let me forget." Outside, the autumn air bit through my jacket. I drove to the cafe in a daze, the pregnancy test photo burning a hole in my phone. Sarah was already there, looking nothing like the woman in Martin's old photos. Her hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was a lifeline. "I saw your name in the hospital records," she said without preamble. "Shellfish allergy, just like my peanut allergy." Martin told me about Christmas dinner. Sarah's laugh was bitter. "That was just the final act. Did you know Evelyn kept a detailed food diary when I was pregnant? Tracking everything I ate, suggesting what was best for the baby." My blood ran cold. "Did you—" "Lose the baby? Yes." Her knuckles went white around the cup. "Severe allergic reaction at 7 months. Everyone said it was my fault for not being careful enough." Nathan believed her, of course. "I'm so sorry. I'm not here for sympathy." She pulled out her phone, showing me a social media post from Evelyn, a photo of baby clothes with the caption, "Can't wait to help take care of my new grandbaby." "She's already claiming your child," Sarah said softly, "just like she tried to claim mine." The pregnancy test, the nursery comments, the constant undermining. Pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I ran." Sarah's eyes met mine. "I ran, and I lost everything. My marriage, my family, my chance to be a mother. Don't make my mistake. Fight." My phone buzzed again. "Ryan, where are you? Mum's worried." "Of course she is," I muttered. Sarah reached across the table, her grip surprisingly strong. "Be careful. The more evidence you gather, the more dangerous she'll become. She's not just trying to control you anymore. She wants your baby." "I won't let that happen." "No," Sarah agreed. "You won't, because you have something I didn't." "What's that?" "Me, Martin, Claire, witnesses who know the truth." She stood, leaving a business card behind. "And you have these." She pulled out a USB drive. Copies of every email, every text, every accident report from my pregnancy. I kept them all, even after I left. Maybe I was waiting for someone like you. Later, sitting in my car, I stared at the pregnancy test photo again. Then I pulled up my messages to Ryan, fingers hovering over the keys. Instead of texting, I called Claire. "I need you to run a test for me," I said when she answered. "Check if someone's been tampering with my prenatal vitamins." "You think—" "I don't think anymore, I know." I started the car, decision crystallizing. And I need you to help me set a trap. What kind of trap? I thought of Sarah's haunted eyes, of Martin's careful documentation, of the baby growing inside me. The kind that ends this, once and for all. Claire's lab results arrived while I was setting up my trap. Your prenatal vitamins were laced with trace amounts of shellfish extract, she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. Not enough to cause a severe reaction, but enough to keep you slightly ill, to make you look unstable. The baby kicked as I stared at the nursery walls, half painted in soft yellows. Ryan's careful architectural sketches for the room layout still hung by the door, mocking me with their innocence. The baby shower's tomorrow, I said. Everything ready? Sarah's agreed to come. Martin's bringing the evidence. I've got 3 nurses from my unit who worked with Evelyn, ready to testify about past incidents. Claire paused. Are you sure about this? Going public at your own baby shower? It's what she'd least expect. I touched the small camera hidden in my necklace. And she'll be performing for an audience. My phone lit up with Evelyn's message. Just finished the special cake for tomorrow. Use that lovely almond extract you like. I showed Claire the text. See, she's already setting it up, making sure everyone knows I specifically requested almond extract, even though your medical records clearly show a tree nut sensitivity. Claire's typing echoed through the phone. Adding it to the evidence file. A key turned in the front door, Ryan coming home early. I quickly ended the call, but not before hearing Claire's final warning. Remember, if anything feels wrong tomorrow. Victoria? Ryan's voice carried up the stairs, worried. Always worried lately. Mum says you haven't confirmed the final guest count. I met him in the hallway, studying his face. The dark circles under his eyes matched mine, his architect's precision crumbling under the weight of divided loyalties. I was just looking at the nursery, I said instead of answering. Remember when we first designed it? He smiled, some tension easing. You shot down all my modern minimalist ideas, because babies need warmth, not concrete and glass. I took his hand, pressing it against my belly where our child moved. Ryan, what if something happened to me? His body stiffened. Nothing's going to happen. But if it did, would you let your mother raise our baby? That's not. Would you? I pulled away, needing to see his face clearly. Would you trust her with our child's life? Something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or memory. You're upset about the vitamins. My heart stopped. You know? Mom mentioned you might be paranoid about them. She suggested we switch brands, but... Did she suggest the brand? His silence was answer enough. I walked back into the nursery, running my fingers over the crib rail. Sarah lost her baby at 7 months. Did you know that? Nathan said she was careless about her allergies. Is that what Evelyn told him to say? Ryan's hands gripped the doorframe. Why are you doing this? Because tomorrow your mother's either going to watch me eat that almond cake or watch me refuse and prove I'm being difficult again. I turned to face him fully. Which do you think she's planning on? Stop. Your father keeps records, Ryan, of everything. Every accident, every convenient allergic reaction, every person who's ever challenged her control. I said stop. His shout startled us both. In the sudden silence, he looked lost, almost afraid. Just come to the shower, please. Show everyone you're not. Not what? Paranoid? Unstable? Unfit to be a mother? Before he could answer, both our phones chimed. Evelyn had posted in the family group chat a photo of herself in the kitchen, surrounded by shower preparations, beaming with manufactured joy. The caption read, "Can't wait to take care of my girls tomorrow. And blessed grandma." Ryan stared at his phone, then at me, something finally shifting in his expression. She hasn't posted anything about the baby being a girl. We haven't told anyone yet. No, I agreed quietly. We haven't. He sank down onto the rocking chair we'd picked out together, head in his hands. After a long moment, he looked up, and I saw my husband again, not Evelyn's son. Tell me everything, he said. From the beginning. I pulled out my phone, showing him the growing evidence file. It started long before me, and if we don't stop it now, it'll never end. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight, watching Ryan finally see the truth, I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about breaking a cycle, about protecting not just our child, but every future victim of Evelyn's love. The baby shower cake sat in the center of Evelyn's dining room like a beautiful poison. Guests clustered around it, admiring the delicate frosting work, the perfectly piped roses. Only Claire, stationed nearby with an EpiPen in her purse, knew about the almond extract hidden beneath the sweetness. Time for the mother-to-be to cut the cake. Evelyn's voice carried across the room, drawing everyone's attention. Her eyes met mine, a challenge wrapped in concern. Unless you're still feeling unwell, dear. The hidden camera in my necklace felt heavy. Sarah stood in the corner, a ghost from Evelyn's past come back to haunt her. Martin's evidence file waited on my phone. Everything was in place, but something was wrong. Ryan wasn't here. He'd left early this morning, saying he needed time to think. Now his absence screamed danger. Victoria? Evelyn pressed the knife into my hand. Everyone's waiting. Claire shifted closer. We can still stop this. But I saw the phones already raised, ready to record what Evelyn had orchestrated. Either I'd eat the cake and suffer an allergic reaction, proving her point about my carelessness, or I'd refuse and appear paranoid, confirming her whispers about my mental state. Before we cut the cake, I said, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet, I'd like to share something. Evelyn's smile flickered. The cake will get warm, dear. It can wait. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling slightly. I have some interesting photos to share first. The front door opened. Ryan walked in, but he wasn't alone. Nathan followed, carrying a familiar-looking box. Mom, Nathan's voice cracked. I found these in your study. My heart stopped. The box contained dozens of EpiPens, carefully labeled with dates and names. Sarah's, mine, others. I can explain, Evelyn started, but Nathan wasn't finished. There's more. He pulled out a notebook. Records of every reaction, times, doses, symptoms, like some sick experiment. The room erupted in whispers. Evelyn's face transformed, masks dropping away like autumn leaves. You don't understand, she said, her voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. I had to know I could take care of them, had to be sure I could handle any emergency. By causing them? Ryan's voice shook. I protected them. Evelyn's composure shattered completely. Sarah was reckless. Victoria's unstable. The baby needs... The baby? My hand went protectively to my stomach. What did you do to my vitamins? Nothing permanent. Her smile turned savage. Just enough to keep you dependent, to show Ryan you needed help, my help. The room spun, not just the vitamins, every cup of tea, every meal she'd insisted on preparing. How long? I whispered. Since the wedding. She stepped closer, reaching for my belly. I had to be sure you were worthy, that you could handle it, and you failed, every time. But don't worry, I'll take care of everything now. Claire moved to intervene, but Evelyn was faster. She grabbed the cake knife from my hand, brandishing it with the expertise of someone who'd planned this moment. Nobody moves, she said pleasantly. Victoria and I are going to take a little drive, to somewhere quiet where we can wait for the baby properly. Mom, stop. Ryan's voice was steady now, certain. It's over. It's never over. Her laugh was brittle. Ask Sarah, ask any of them. I always win. The knife pressed against my side, hidden from the guests by her body. In her eyes, I saw something worse than hatred or anger, absolute conviction. The baby's a girl, she whispered in my ear. I've already picked her name. The room tilted sideways. All my careful plans, the evidence, the witnesses, none of it mattered. I'd underestimated her desperation, her willingness to destroy everything to maintain control. Move toward the door, she murmured. Slowly. I caught Claire's eye, saw her reach for her phone, but Evelyn saw too. The knife pressed harder. "One call," she warned, "and we'll see how well Victoria handles stress in her condition." As she guided me toward the door, I realized with horrible clarity this wasn't just about exposing her anymore. This was about survival. And somewhere in this house full of witnesses, I had to find a way to save not just myself, but my daughter, from a woman who would rather destroy us both than lose control. Evelyn's hand trembled against my back as she guided me through the kitchen, past the shocked faces of party guests. The knife pressed harder when Ryan moved to follow. "Stay there, sweetheart," she called out, her principal's voice still perfectly controlled. "Victoria and I just need some girl time." The baby kicked, hard enough to make me gasp. Evelyn mistook it for fear, her grip loosening slightly. "See, she knows her grandmother." That's when I saw it. The reflection in the kitchen window. Martin, moving silently through the side door. All those years of staying quiet, watching, documenting, he'd learned how to become invisible to her. "Tell me about the others," I said, playing for time. "The ones before Sarah." "They were weak." Evelyn's voice took on a dreamy quality. "Unable to handle the responsibility. But you lasted longer than most, even with the vitamins, the food, the little tests that could have killed my baby. To make you stronger." The knife shook against my ribs. "Everything I did was to protect this family, to ensure only the worthy remained." Martin was closer now. I caught Claire's eye through the doorway, saw her slight nod. Whatever happened next, they were ready. "Is that what happened to your baby?" The words hit like a thunderbolt. Evelyn's grip tightened painfully. "Who told you?" she hissed. "Your medical records." Claire's voice rang out clear. "From 40 years ago, the baby you lost because your mother-in-law decided you weren't worthy." The knife clattered to the floor. Evelyn's hands went to her throat, a gesture I'd seen before, when I was gasping for air at her dinner table. "She tested me too," Evelyn whispered, "over and over, until I failed, until I lost everything. So you became her." Martin's quiet voice behind us made Evelyn spin around. "You turned into the very thing that destroyed you. I made them stronger." But her voice cracked, the facade crumbling. "I had to know they could survive. By poisoning them." Ryan stepped forward, phone in hand. "We have it all, Mom. Every test, every accident. The police are on their way." Evelyn lunged for the knife, but I was ready. Months of rage and fear crystallized into a single moment of clarity. I kicked it away, watching it skid under the refrigerator. "You don't understand," she sobbed, but her eyes darted toward the drawer where I knew she kept her backup plan. More EpiPens, more ways to control through crisis. "I understand perfectly." My voice was steady now. "You're not testing us. You're punishing us for a crime we didn't commit. For a loss that wasn't our fault." She moved like lightning, yanking open the drawer, but Sarah was faster, having slipped in during the chaos. The drawer was empty. "Looking for these?" Sarah held up a plastic bag full of EpiPens. 40 years of weapons, Evelyn. "Did you label them all yourself?" Evelyn's face contorted. For a moment, I saw past the monster to the broken woman beneath. The grieving mother who'd chosen to perpetuate her pain rather than heal from it. "I can help you," she pleaded, reaching for my belly one last time. "I know how to keep her safe. By teaching her fear," I caught her wrist, "by making her doubt every meal, every relationship, every moment of joy." The baby kicked again, and something shifted in Evelyn's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or remembrance. "I never meant," she started, but the words dissolved into sobs. Ryan moved forward, not to comfort but to contain. As he guided his mother to a chair, the sound of sirens grew closer. "I did it for you," she whispered to him, "all of it, for the family." "No, Mom." Ryan's voice was gentle but firm. "You did it to the family, and now it's over." As the police entered, I felt the weight of the hidden camera lift from my neck. Claire pressed an untainted glass of water into my hands. Martin stood guard by the drawer of horrors. Sarah watched her former mother-in-law led away, tears streaming down her face. Not for Evelyn, but for the baby she'd lost to this crusade. The revenge I'd planned had transformed into something else. A rescue mission, not just for myself and my daughter, but for every victim of Evelyn's twisted love, including, perhaps, Evelyn herself. Victoria, Ryan reached for my hand. Let's go home. Home, where we'd build something new from these ashes. Something based on trust instead of tests, love instead of fear. The baby kicked once more, as if in agreement. The nursery walls glowed soft yellow in the morning light as I rocked our daughter, breathing in her newborn scent. Ryan's architectural plan still hung by the door, but now they shared space with photos. Claire cutting the hospital bracelet, Martin holding his granddaughter for the first time, Sarah's tearful smile as she touched the baby's hand. The trial documents sat unopened on the changing table. Nathan had dropped them off yesterday, his usual indifference cracked by something darker. "Mum's asking to see the baby," he'd said, not quite meeting my eyes. "She's completed the court-mandated therapy, and with good behavior." I'd closed the door before he finished. Now, watching my daughter's peaceful face, I understood something about cycles, how they don't break cleanly, but spiral outward like ripples in water. The investigation had uncovered 3 decades of Evelyn's victims. Some had come forward for the trial. Others remained silent, their scars too deep for public display. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Ryan entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. A simple act that had taken months to feel safe again. "Claire called," he said, setting my cup down. "Sarah's starting a support group. For the others." I nodded, remembering the quiet strength in Sarah's voice when she'd testified, how she'd looked directly at Evelyn and said, "I forgive you, but I'll never forget." "Nathan thinks we're being too harsh," Ryan continued, his fingers brushing our daughter's cheek. "That everyone deserves a second chance. This was her second chance," I said quietly, "and her third and fourth. Every victim was another chance to choose differently." The baby stirred, her tiny hand wrapping around my finger. We'd named her Hope, not for what we'd lost, but for what we'd found in the ashes of Evelyn's destruction. A new kind of family, built on truth instead of tests. Martin visited weekly, bringing his engineer's precision to grandfather duties. He'd installed security cameras, tested every surface for allergens, created spreadsheets of safety protocols. But unlike Evelyn's obsessive control, his care came wrapped in love, not fear. "The prosecutor called," Ryan said after a moment. "Mum's written another letter." I looked at the stack of unopened envelopes on my desk. Each one addressed to Hope, each one returned unopened. Evelyn's new method of control, trying to write herself into our daughter's story before it began. "She says she's changed," Ryan added, but his tone held no conviction. "Maybe she has." I shifted Hope to my shoulder, breathing in her baby powder scent. But that's her journey now, not ours. Through the window, I could see Claire arriving for her daily visit, carrying grocery bags. She'd appointed herself our food tester, our safety net, our bridge back to trust. In her wake came Sarah, then Martin, our chosen family gathering for Sunday breakfast. "Sometimes I wonder," Ryan said, watching them approach, "if revenge and healing look the same in the end. Mum's alone now, facing her demons. Isn't that what you wanted?" "No." I stood, cradling Hope close. "I wanted justice. The loneliness. That's just the natural consequence of her choices." Hope made a small sound, drawing everyone's attention as they entered. Sarah's eyes brightened, though I caught the familiar shadow of grief beneath her smile. Martin moved to the window, checking the locks with practiced ease. Claire unpacked groceries, each item carefully labeled and verified. We carried scars, all of us, but we'd learned to wear them differently than Evelyn had. Instead of using them as weapons, we'd turn them into shields, protecting the next generation from the poison of the past. "Ready for breakfast?" Claire called from the kitchen. "Almost," I answered, settling Hope into Ryan's arms. As I watched them together, I thought about cycles again, about how breaking them doesn't mean forgetting, but choosing differently. Every meal shared without fear, every touch given in love, every truth spoken openly, these were our victories now. The morning light caught Hope's face, making her look luminous. In that moment, I saw not just my daughter, but a promise that some chains are meant to be broken, that some victories come not from revenge, but from refusing to continue the dance. I touched the last unopened letter from Evelyn, then turned away. Some stories needed to end for others to begin. Coming, I called to Claire, leaving the past behind, stepping into the light of our hard-won peace.
Edith, I can't believe you did this. My mother-in-law's voice was sharp, her face a mask of disbelief. I stood there, clutching the letter that revealed Mark's secret life. My world shattered in that instant. What is the meaning of this? Gloria demanded, snatching the letter from my trembling hands. Before I could respond, Mark stormed into the room, his expression thunderous. What's going on here? I swallowed hard, my throat constricting with a mix of anger and heartbreak. How long have you known? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark's eyes narrowed. None of your business, Edith, he retorted, turning away. Gloria thrust the letter at him. Explain this, Mark. Your wife has uncovered your little secret. Mark's jaw tightened as he scanned the contents. It's not what you think, he muttered, refusing to meet my gaze. Not what I think, I echoed, my voice rising. This letter details your affair with Michelle, a woman half my age. Watch your tone, Edith, Gloria snapped. This is a family matter. I whirled on her, my composure cracking. A family matter? While your son was gallivanting around with his mistress, I was here, holding everything together, Mark scoffed. Don't act so innocent. You've been a cold, distant wife for years. Because you've been emotionally absent. I shot back. Late nights, unexplained absences. It all makes sense now. Gloria stepped between us, her eyes flashing. Enough of this nonsense. We will not let this ruin our family's reputation. I stared at her, incredulous. Reputation? Your son has been carrying on an affair, and you're worried about reputation? You've always been a poor excuse for a wife, Gloria sniped. No wonder Mark strayed. Yet I'm the one holding this family together, I replied calmly, my anger hardening into resolve. Mark laughed bitterly. Is that what you think? You're delusional, Edith. I met his gaze, unflinching. No, Mark. I'm finally seeing clearly, and I'm done living a lie. Gloria's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare leave this family. I straightened my shoulders, a newfound strength surging through me. Watch me. Turning on my heel, I strode out of the room, leaving my shattered marriage behind. It was time to start living for myself and my son, Peter. No more lies, no more toxic relationships. A new chapter was beginning, and I was ready to embrace it, come what may. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of Mark's betrayal pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. Memories of our once happy marriage flickered through my mind, taunting me with what could have been. How did we reach this point? I thought bitterly. The signs had been there all along. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the growing emotional distance. But I had chosen to turn a blind eye, desperate to preserve the illusion of a perfect family. Gloria's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. You've always been a poor excuse for a wife. No wonder Mark strayed. Tears stung my eyes as I recalled the countless sacrifices I had made for this family, putting my own dreams and aspirations aside to be the dutiful wife and mother. And what did I have to show for it? A cheating husband and a manipulative mother-in-law who delighted in twisting the knife deeper. A soft knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. Mom? Peter's voice was tentative, laced with concern. I hastily wiped my eyes and cleared my throat. Come in, sweetheart. Peter slipped into the room, his brow furrowed. Are you okay? I heard shouting earlier. Mustering a brave smile, I patted the bed beside me. It's nothing for you to worry about, honey. Just some grown-up issues. He settled next to me, his eyes searching mine. Is it about Dad? I know things haven't been great between you two lately. I sighed, my heart aching at the thought of shattering his innocence. Your father and I are going through a difficult time. Yes, but we'll figure it out one way or another. Peter nodded solemnly. I just want us to be a family again, like we used to be. His words pierced my soul. How could I tell him that the family he knew was already gone, torn apart by Mark's selfish actions? I pulled him into a tight embrace, blinking back fresh tears. "I love you, Peter," I whispered fiercely. "No matter what happens, remember that." He hugged me back, his skinny arms wrapping around me with a strength that belied his age. "I love you too, Mom. We'll get through this together." As I held my son close, a newfound determination surged within me. I would not let Mark's betrayal define us. I would not allow Gloria's toxic influence to poison our lives any longer. It was time to take control, to forge a new path, one where Peter and I could find true happiness, free from the shackles of a broken marriage and toxic family dynamics. The road ahead would be difficult, but with my son by my side, I knew I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. This was just the beginning of our journey towards healing and redemption. And I would stop at nothing to ensure that Peter and I emerged from this storm stronger and more resilient than ever before. The next morning, I steeled myself for another confrontation with Mark. As I entered the kitchen, he was already there, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. Mark glanced up, his expression bored. "About what, Edith?" I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to hurl the nearest object at his smug face. "About your little secret, the affair you've been carrying on behind my back." He snorted derisively. "So you found out. Big deal. It's not like we've had a real marriage for years." My jaw dropped at his callous words. "How can you say that? I've devoted my life to this family, to being a good wife and mother." "And a lousy job you've done," Gloria chimed in, sweeping into the room. "If you had been a better wife, Mark wouldn't have strayed." I rounded on her, my temper flaring. "Stay out of this, Gloria. This is between me and your son." "Like hell it is," she snapped. "This involves my family, and I won't let you ruin it with your dramatics." Mark set down his coffee mug, his eyes narrowing. "Enough of this. I'm leaving for a week, Edith. Try not to mess things up while I'm gone." I stared at him, incredulous. "You're leaving? Just like that?" He shrugged, already gathering his things. "I need a break from all this nonsense. Don't wait up." As he brushed past me, I felt a surge of anger and despair. How could he be so callous, so dismissive of our marriage, our family? And yet, a part of me couldn't help but feel relieved at the prospect of a temporary reprieve from his toxic presence. Gloria fixed me with a steely glare. "You'd better not do anything rash while he's gone, Edith. This family has a reputation to uphold." I met her gaze, my resolve hardening. "Don't worry, Gloria. I can manage without him just fine." As Mark's car pulled out of the driveway, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I wouldn't have to walk on eggshells, constantly trying to appease his whims and Gloria's demands. Peter emerged from his room, his brow furrowed. "Is Dad really leaving?" I pulled him into a reassuring hug. "It's just for a week, honey. We'll be okay." His arms tightened around me. "I don't like it when you two fight." My heart clenched at the sadness in his voice. "I know, sweetheart, but sometimes grown-ups have to work through their problems in their own way." As I held my son close, I silently vowed to protect him from the toxic environment that had consumed our family for far too long. This week would be a chance for us to breathe, to remember what it felt like to live without the constant weight of Mark's emotional absence and Gloria's manipulative interference. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, this temporary separation would be the catalyst for something more permanent. A chance for me to finally break free and build the life Peter and I deserved, far away from the toxicity that had plagued us for so long. The first few days of Mark's absence were a welcome reprieve, but my relief was short-lived. On the third day, Peter came down with a high fever, and my world was thrown into chaos once again. "It's a fever, Mom, but he's burning up. I don't know what to do." I sobbed into the phone, cradling my ailing son in my arms. "We're on our way, darling. Hang in there." My mother's soothing voice came through the line. I tried my best to keep Peter comfortable, but his condition only seemed to worsen. Gloria hovered nearby, her disapproving glares piercing through me like daggers. "This is what happens when you don't have a proper man around the house," she sniffed, her words dripping with disdain. I bit back a retort, too exhausted and worried to engage in her toxic games. All that mattered was getting Peter the help he needed. When my parents finally arrived, my mother swooped in like a guardian angel, taking charge of the situation with a calm efficiency that I envied. Let me take a look at him, sweetheart, she murmured, gently brushing Peter's sweat-soaked hair from his forehead. My father pulled me into a comforting embrace, his eyes filled with concern. How are you holding up, Edith? I shook my head, fighting back tears. I'm at my wit's end, Dad. Mark's gone, and Gloria's been no help at all. I don't know what to do. Gloria scoffed from the corner. If you had been a better wife, none of this would be happening. My father's eyes flashed with anger. That's enough, Gloria. Can't you see my daughter is struggling? Where's your compassion? Compassion? Gloria sneered. She brought this upon herself by driving Mark away. I flinched as if struck, her words cutting deeper than any physical blow. Was she right? Had my confrontation with Mark about his affair pushed him to abandon us in our time of need? My mother's voice cut through the tension, her tone firm but gentle. Edith, why don't you come and sit with Peter for a while? I'll make us all some tea. Grateful for the reprieve, I settled beside my son's bed, gently stroking his flushed cheek. His eyes fluttered open, and he managed a weak smile. Mom, I'm sorry for causing so much trouble, he whispered. My heart broke at his words. Oh, honey, you have nothing to be sorry for. I'm the one who's sorry for letting things get so out of hand. Peter's brow furrowed. Is it because of Dad? I know you two haven't been getting along. I swallowed hard, unsure of how much to reveal. Your father and I are going through some difficult times, yes. But that's not your fault, sweetheart. You're the one thing in my life that brings me joy. His small hand found mine, and he gave it a gentle squeeze. I love you, Mom. We'll get through this together. In that moment, my son's unwavering love and strength filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. No matter what obstacles lay ahead, I would fight tooth and nail to protect him from the toxicity that had plagued our family for far too long. As my mother returned with a tray of steaming tea, I met her gaze with a newfound determination. With her and my father's support, I knew I had the strength to weather any storm, even one as tempestuous as the one brewing between Mark, Gloria, and me. Just when I thought the storm had passed, the phone rang, shattering the fragile peace we had found. My heart raced as I answered, bracing myself for more bad news. Edith, there's been an accident. You need to come to the hospital, the voice on the other end urged. My blood ran cold. What happened? Is it Peter? No, it's Mark. He was in a car accident. Relief and anger flooded through me in equal measure. Relief that my son was safe, but anger that Mark's recklessness had once again disrupted our lives. What happened? I asked, my voice trembling. There was a pause, and then the caller spoke the words that would change everything. Mark was with another woman. The world seemed to spin as the weight of those words sank in. His affair, the secret he had so carefully guarded, was now exposed for all to see. I felt a twisted sense of vindication, knowing that his lies had finally caught up with him. I'll be right there, I managed, hanging up the phone. My parents exchanged worried glances, sensing the shift in my demeanor. Edith, what's going on? My mother asked gently. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Mark was in an accident. He was with his mistress. Gloria's face drained of color, her usual haughty expression replaced by one of shock and dismay. For once she was speechless, my father's brow furrowed. Are you all right, sweetheart? Do you want us to come with you? I shook my head, a newfound determination surging through me. No, Dad. This is something I need to handle on my own. As I made my way to the hospital, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The secrets, the lies, the betrayal. It was all out in the open now. Mark had no more cards to play, no more excuses to hide behind. When I arrived at his room, the sight of him lying there, battered and vulnerable, should have filled me with pity. Instead, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, knowing that he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Edith, he croaked, his eyes widening as I approached his bedside. Don't bother, Mark, I said, holding up a hand to silence him. I know everything. Your little secret is out. He flinched, his gaze dropping in shame. For once he had no snide remarks, no dismissive comments to deflect the truth. So, what now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Now, we face the reality of our situation. No more lies, no more secrets. It's time to decide what we really want. Mark's eyes met mine, a flicker of defiance still burning within them. And what if I don't want to let you go? I held his gaze, my resolve unwavering. That's not your decision to make anymore, Mark. You lost that right the moment you betrayed our marriage. As the weight of my words settled over him, I felt a sense of power, a newfound strength that had been buried for far too long. The tables had turned, and for once, I was the one in control. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be a victim of Mark's selfish actions or Gloria's toxic manipulations. It was time to take back my life, to fight for the happiness and peace that had eluded me for far too long. And as I looked into Mark's defeated eyes, I knew that this time I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The hospital room was thick with tension as I faced Mark, his battered form a stark reminder of the consequences of his actions. For once he seemed subdued, unable to deflect the harsh reality that had come crashing down upon us. "So, this is it, Mark," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. "We're done." I held out the divorce papers, the weight of their implications heavy in my hands. This was the moment I had both dreaded and longed for, the chance to finally sever the toxic ties that had bound us for far too long. Mark's eyes widened, a flicker of defiance still burning within them. "You wouldn't dare," he growled, his words laced with a familiar arrogance. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Watch me." As he stared at the papers, his bravado seemed to falter, replaced by a rare glimpse of vulnerability. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity for him. Almost. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw it all away?" he asked, his voice tinged with desperation. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed through the sterile room. "Everything we've been through? You mean the years of emotional neglect, the constant disrespect, the lies and betrayal?" Mark flinched, his eyes dropping to the stark white sheets that covered his battered form. "You did this, Mark," I continued, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pent-up frustration. "You destroyed our marriage with your selfish actions, your complete disregard for our family." His jaw clenched, but he remained silent, unable to deflect the truth that hung heavy in the air between us. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I put my dreams aside, sacrificed my own happiness, all for the sake of our family. And how did you repay me? By carrying on an affair with a woman half my age, flaunting your infidelity for the world to see." Mark opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't bother making excuses, Mark. It's too late for that. The damage is done, and there's no going back." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Sign the papers, Mark. It's over." His eyes met mine, a flicker of defiance still burning within their depths. "And if I refuse?" I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed through the sterile room. "Then you'll be left with nothing. No wife, no family, no reputation. Just the consequences of your own selfish actions." As the weight of my words settled over him, I could see the fight draining from his eyes, replaced by a weary resignation. "Fine," he muttered, reaching for the pen beside his bed. "Have it your way, Edith." With a shaky hand, he scrawled his signature across the papers, sealing our fate with a few strokes of ink. As I gathered the documents, a sense of finality washed over me. It was done. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Mark's toxic presence was finally closed. "I hope it was worth it, Mark," I said, my voice laced with a mixture of sadness and triumph. "Because from this moment on, you're on your own." Turning on my heel, I strode out of the room, leaving him to grapple with the wreckage of our shattered marriage. A weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with a newfound sense of strength and resilience. Mark's betrayal had been a harsh lesson, but it had also been a catalyst for change, a chance to break free from the toxic cycle that had consumed our lives for far too long. As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, I took a deep breath, savoring the taste of freedom. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would write my own story, free from the shackles of a loveless marriage and the toxic influence of those who sought to control me. And as the sun rose over the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and possibility, a promise of better days to come, where I would finally be the master of my own destiny. As I strode out of Mark's hospital room, the weight of our shattered marriage finally lifted from my shoulders, I was met with a familiar, unwelcome sight. Gloria, her face contorted in a mask of fury. "What have you done, Edith?" she hissed, her eyes boring into me like daggers. I squared my shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "What needed to be done, Gloria? Mark and I are through." Her nostrils flared, and she took a step closer, her presence looming over me like a dark cloud. "You will not ruin this family, Edith. Not after everything we've built." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed through the sterile hallway. "The family was already ruined, Gloria, and I won't be part of it anymore." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. "So you're just going to abandon your husband in his time of need? After all he's done for you?" I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "Don't try to twist this, Gloria. Mark brought this upon himself with his selfish actions. He's the one who betrayed our vows, our family." Gloria's lips curled into a sneer. "And you think you're blameless in all this? If you had been a better wife, a more attentive partner, he wouldn't have strayed." Her words stung, but I refused to let them pierce my newfound armor. "That's a convenient excuse, Gloria, but we both know the truth." Her brow furrowed, and she took a step closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "What truth?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "That you knew about Mark's affair all along, that you helped him cover it up just to preserve your precious family image." Gloria's face drained of color, and for a moment she seemed at a loss for words. Then her eyes narrowed and she regained her composure. "So what if I did?" she spat. "I was protecting our family, something you clearly have no concept of." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You were protecting your own selfish interests, Gloria, just like Mark, and I'm done being a pawn in your twisted games." Her jaw clenched, and I could see the fury simmering just beneath the surface. "You ungrateful little wretch. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "You've done nothing for me, Gloria. All you've ever done is tear me down, make me feel small and insignificant. Well, no more." Her eyes widened, and she took a step back, as if struck by my words. "I'm taking my life back, Gloria," I continued, my voice steady and unwavering, "and you and Mark can no longer stand in my way." For a moment we stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills, the tension crackling between us like electricity. Then Gloria's shoulders slumped, and I saw a flicker of something I never thought I'd see in her eyes: defeat. "Fine," she muttered, her voice laced with venom. "Have it your way, Edith, but don't come crawling back when you realize the mistake you've made." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed away, leaving me standing in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. As the adrenaline coursed through my veins, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. For years, Gloria had held me in her iron grip, using her manipulative tactics to control every aspect of my life. But not anymore. I was free, truly free, for the first time in as long as I could remember. And as I turned to leave the hospital, a newfound sense of purpose propelled me forward. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would write my own story, free from the toxic influence of those who sought to control me. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with a strength and resilience that had been forged in the fires of adversity. As I stepped out into the warm embrace of the sun, I couldn't help but smile. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time it was mine to shape, to mold into something beautiful and fulfilling. And as I made my way home to the son who had been my unwavering source of strength and inspiration, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front, bound by a love that could never be broken, even by the most toxic of influences. The weight of the past few weeks seemed to lift from my shoulders as I stepped through the front door, greeted by the familiar warmth of home. Peter rushed to embrace me, his eyes shining with a mixture of relief and concern. "Mom, you're back. Is everything okay?" I pulled him close, savoring the moment. "Everything's going to be just fine, sweetheart. Better than fine." He pulled back, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean? What happened with Dad?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Peter, your father and we're separating." His eyes widened, and I could see the questions forming on his lips. "I know this is a lot to take in," I continued, guiding him to the couch. "But it's for the best, believe me." Peter nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that belied his age. Is it because of the fighting and his other woman? I felt a pang of sadness that my son had been exposed to such ugliness, but I knew it was better to be honest with him. Yes, honey, your father made some choices that hurt our family deeply, and as much as I love him, I can't stay in a relationship like that anymore. Peter's eyes glistened with unshed tears. But what about us? Are we still a family? I pulled him into a fierce embrace, my heart swelling with love for this remarkable boy. Of course we are, Peter. You and I will always be a family, no matter what happens. And this time, it'll be a family built on love, respect, and honesty. He nodded against my shoulder, and I could feel the tension slowly leaving his body. I'm sorry you had to go through all this, sweetheart, I murmured, stroking his hair. But I promise, better days are ahead. As we sat there, holding each other close, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a calm certainty that I was finally on the right path. The road ahead would be challenging, but with Peter by my side, I knew we could weather any storm. In the days and weeks that followed, we settled into a new routine, one free from the toxic influence of Mark and Gloria. I reconnected with old friends, finding solace and support in their unwavering companionship. And slowly but surely, the wounds of the past began to heal. One sunny afternoon, as Peter and I strolled through the park, hand in hand, he turned to me with a smile that warmed my heart. Mommy, can we visit Grandpa and Grandma tomorrow? I couldn't help but grin, filled with gratitude for the loving family that had stood by us through it all. Of course, darling, we're free to do whatever we want now. As we continued our walk, surrounded by the laughter of children and the gentle rustling of leaves, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. This was the life I had dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and the freedom to forge our own path. No longer would we be shackled by the toxic bonds of a broken marriage or the manipulative whims of those who sought to control us. We were free, truly free, to embrace the future on our own terms. And as I looked into Peter's eyes, shining with hope and possibility, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, a united front, bound by a love that could never be broken, even by the most toxic of influences. This was the beginning of our new chapter, one filled with endless possibilities and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. And as we walked hand in hand into the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and gratitude for the resilience that had carried us through the darkest of storms. We had emerged from the ashes of our past, stronger and more resilient than ever before. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I knew that our journey had only just begun. A journey towards healing, happiness, and the reclamation of our lives on our own terms.